You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
And so the Stanley Cup Final is now down to a best of three. It's Nick Alberga, Carter Hutton, the Friday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by Bet365. What's going on, Huts?
Not much, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still reacting, thinking about Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final last night and how many renditions and iterations of that type of game have played out here in Leafs Nation. And the Leafs were unable to win that game. But you got to credit the Oilers, man. Down 3 Cobb after 1. I would love to have Amazon and their cameras, and hopefully they were in the room for the Oilers down 3-0 in a pivotal Game 4 to hear and see what was said. Did McDavid step up? Did Perry say something? Because a much different Oilers team after that.
Insane. Like, what a second period from a team that was down and out. And again, I wish I could go back to the timeline on my phone of just like people texting me after the first period, like, this team's shit, this is done, series. And then all of a sudden it's just a swing, right? And it just goes to show you how deep this team is and the momentum they have. And obviously a big decision too, going to Pickard, right? I feel like they had to. I feel like their hands were tied. And I loved hearing his comments after how he was so chill on the TNT broadcast, right? He was such a good interview. And the fact that they told him with like 3 minutes to go on the clock to go back out. So he had no time to prepare, just threw him to the wolves. And man, did he answer the bell with a few big saves at the right time to give this team the win.
Yeah, the one that stands out was a save on Anton Lundell there in the second period. But I was sort of chuckling over Pickard's commentary following. They asked him about the stare down with Skinner, Vanacek. That was, your goalies are so weird. Just make a save. But Pickard pretty much asked him verbatim, like, why don't you come stretch with me? Vanacek said no. He's like, I had nothing else to bring to the table, so I skated away. But you could tell that they're trying to do everything possible to get in Skinner's head. And he has been a bigger and bigger story. But luckily for Edmonton, I'm really getting those Aiden Hill vibes right now from Pickard. Are you?
Yeah, he's just finding a way to get it done, right? And at times he takes a lot of criticism in his game because he's not as well groomed as most guys we watch in the NHL. When we talk about Bobrovsky, we're talking about all these guys that are so good on the ice and the way they cut down angles and slide and post-integration play and all the terms and goalie things that go on. He's a little clunkier, but he's a gamer. He's an absolute gamer. I played against him for a long time. He just knows how to make saves. He makes timely saves. It doesn't know. And that's one thing with goaltending. It doesn't matter how you make it as long as you do it. And again, he's been rock solid. And I think there's a confidence instilled in the team when a guy goes in and he can play well, right? We've seen that firsthand with the Leafs with Samsonov for how many years, where he would go in and it's just that always little worry is over your shoulder of him. Is he going to give up a shitty one? Is he going to play bad? And then you see other guys go in and there's more confidence. And I think that's what's going on right now with this Edmonton Oilers team.
Goaltending, a big topic point on today's podcast. We are going to deliberate and debate Anthony Stolarz, what that next contract should look like. And speaking of which, if you want to chime in with your thoughts on that, our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show, hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. It's amazing how this game works out. Like, there's a lot you can draw from Game 2 and Game 4, a lot of parallels, man. But the roles are reversed this time, where it's like the late goal, they tie it up, and then the resilience to come back. But big cojones, I think, on both teams, just the resilience and the battle and the effort, and just showing you the margin for error is razor thin this time of year. Even in overtime, how many big chances did Florida have? The Bennett save, the post on, what was it, Frederick? Like, it's just crazy how it works out sometimes.
Yeah, so many chances. And again, it felt like watching this, I don't know if you felt this way, but in overtime, I was like getting frustrated with Edmonton because it felt like they would get possession behind their net. They would stretch the rink out, and then they'd try to make this pass to the far blue line. And Florida's so structured, they would just turn that puck over and come right back in and be back in their throat, right down their ice. So it felt like they were hanging on for dear life. And how many times have we seen that, Nick, in a hockey game where one team is all over the other team and you're sitting there and a big save, a big moment happens, like the Bennett play, and next thing you know, it goes down off another play and a simple goal off a tip ends up in the back of your net. We see it so many times in hockey, and it's so hard to predict and control that momentum. But that being said, this Florida team is very, very good. And the Edmonton Oilers, I don't think were the better team in this game. But at the end of the day, this time of year, it's about winning hockey games, and they found a way to do it.
That was a fascinating thing to me as Edmonton looked dead to rights. They looked so fatigued, so tired in OT, and it just felt like it was imminent that Florida was going to win the game. And then it's like a little passing play, Corey Perry, and then who else? Leon Draisaitl just doing his thing. And it is night and day when you watch this Edmonton team and namely their stars rise to the occasion game after game after game in the Stanley Cup playoffs compared to the Maple Leafs and the team we watch on a game-by-game basis in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, who else scores that goal but Leon Draisaitl, right? What did you see on that one?
It has to, and it's obviously the play to the middle. And I don't know if that, like, this Perry, like, it bounces over Perry's stick to Draisaitl. Like, I don't think he meant to play it or just the way it worked out, right? It's just so perfect. But I do give Perry a lot of credit here because as a goalie, like, I'm looking at this play, and it obviously goes through Bob off the tip. But because Perry's driving the net, you're like worried and you're aware of that. So you're trying to front him. And then you make the recognition of like, I on that play, he's getting leaned on. Is it Greer that's all over him on that play? I think it's Greer all over Draisaitl. And he has one hand on his stick. So then that kind of, as you're processing it as a goalie, you're like, he's not really a threat to beat me from there with one hand on his stick and the pressure. So you cheat that pass a bit. But if Corey Perry doesn't drive the net, I don't think that play happens. And obviously Draisaitl, standing up after last game in the room, they talked about it, giving the team a hard time, where they're at and what they need to do. And then to walk the walk, right? That's what best players do. You can go to the media, you can say shit, you can say stuff in front of your team, but when the game's on the line, you have to be the best player, and he made a difference.
You just knew that Draisaitl was going to have a big game when he was snubbed for the Hart Trophy. We're going to get to that conversation. Not that he was snubbed, but I thought he was the best player in the league this year and didn't get the award. And I think you can make the case for a variety of different guys. A lot of people pissed off about Nikita Kucherov as well, but a big game play by a star player. And Draisaitl has this knack. Like, I would argue he's one of the most clutch players, I think, in recent memory, the last 15 to 20 years. It just always seems like it's Draisaitl. And there was some star power. I mean, if you're the NHL, you have to be thrilled with this rematch the way it's gone through the first 4 games. 3 of the games have gone to OT, and then just for good measure, the cherry on top in Game 4, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce show up and are in attendance. Like, you laugh, but I think the Swifties are massive for viewership. If you can get some of the Swifties in the mix, I think that's great for the NHL.
Yeah, it's great. Honestly, at the end of the day, this is what it's about. I still got a good NHL pension, so I need the NHL to keep making money and doing well. And
exactly.
And this is like part of the game. You want it to grow. You want to do this. And I know people get frustrated, right? Because they're like, why are they showing her? But like, they're not stupid. This is business. At the end of the day, it's always about business. It's always going to be what makes money. And anyone in their career, this is what it is. It's just a big business. That's a really cool sport. So that being said, I thought the atmosphere was awesome. I thought the atmosphere changed in that third period when it went up 4-3 and to come back and blow that lead. But that place felt like it was going to explode last night. And obviously Sam Reinhart, a teammate of mine, finding the back of the net late. Like just dramatics, right? Like we talk about, I think Frank had a tweet about the 2 goals in NHL history tying up games coming in the same series, how close it was, right? It's just wild. This is like, you can't script this, Nick. This has been an insane series so far.
And again, it's the same suspects getting the job done. Bennett's DNA all over that goal. Reinhart scores that goal. Corey Perry's DNA all over the winner. Draisaitl all over the winner. Like, it's the same cast of characters. And you either have the clutch gene or you don't. But, yeah, I was really impressed to begin with. Florida tying that game up. You blow a lead like that, I think you're dead to rights. But it just shows the resilience of that team. You can never count them out. And the missed clearing attempts as well. But I think it's perfect. I think this series has been very, very close with exception to Game 3 and a really, really good response by Edmonton following that first period. And again, this is exactly from the NHL perspective what you want. But play the caption contest. Well, what do you think they were saying in that box? Wayne Gretzky, Taylor Swift, and Travis Kelce. Like, what could they possibly be discussing there, Huts, is my question.
I don't know. That's a unique group, right? Like, Wayno, I don't know. Like, I guess maybe he's on the pulse now, right? He's around and everything, but it's still a pretty cool honor. I think everyone knows who Gretzky is and even Taylor Swift. And I guess it's good for the game, right, in that sense. And hopefully she becomes a fan. Maybe Kelce, as a retirer, starts to come to more games because you see the character that he is as well, too, and his brother and what they're doing at events and stuff. It draws a lot of attention. And honestly, Nick, I'm with you, man. I know it gets annoying and people get frustrated. I just accept it, right? I think any press is good press. And for the NHL, having Gretzky with them and Taylor Swift at the game, it builds more fans. It gets more eyes on the game, and that's what we want at the end of the day.
Meantime, we got a great guest coming up on today's podcast in about 15 minutes. We're going to touch base here with TSN's Craig Button. I want to get into the Easton Cowan. Obviously, Craig's got a great handle on the scouting world, Easton Cowan, where he projects next season potentially in the NHL. And we'll talk about the current Maple Leafs team as well. So Craig Button's coming up in 15 year Huts.
Yeah, it'll be great. I love Craig. I've had a chance to do a bunch of work with him and get a chance to meet him when I was at TSN one time. And he's been around the game for so long. And I think he has that great mix of being in the game and then in the scouting side and seeing the connections and the growth of players. So it's always nice to pick his brain because he's seen the trajectory of a lot of players and he's been around the game for a long time. So I look forward to this one as always with Craig.
At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. The timing and the scheduling was perfect to have you as my co-host today because obviously we're breaking down the goaltending in the Stanley Cup Final. And Connor Hellebuyck, very seldom do we see this, but he wins the Hart Trophy and the Vezina Trophy. The last Hart Trophy winner coming in between the pipes, Carey Price, of course, in 2015, but 47, 12, and 3, 2 GAA, 943 save percentage, 8 shutouts. It's unfortunate the timing this award comes out because Hellebuyck was Jonas Johansson in the Stanley Cup playoffs or Ilya Samsonov, comparable to Toronto here. But what a season, man. And it's important to note, too, the Vezina's voted on by NHL GMs, the Hart PHWA.
Yeah, I don't know like how he didn't get every vote. I know Vasilevsky got one.
What the hell was that? Like, who's the one?
Right? Like,
who's
is
the
that
one
just
GM?
like a homer? Is that like a homer GM or like you can't vote?
I
for your own
don't think
guys?
you can
like,
vote on. I don't think you can vote on your own guys.
Yeah, like I feel like he ran away with this award, right? We can make an argument about the what went on with the Hart, but like for the Vezina, he was so good, rock start to finish. The best player on this Winnipeg Jets team, kept them in every game, was a huge difference maker, and he's been like that every single year. And the amount of games he plays, he's an absolute workhorse. So obviously this was one where it felt like this was just a formality, right? He was going to win it, and seeing the way they presented it yesterday, I thought it was cool too. I think it's something unique. It's a little less formal, and I think it's more that shock and awe with the way they've done the awards this year.
It was great had it not been leaked on Wednesday. I don't know if you caught that on social media, but some stooge who I guess was in attendance for the Hellebuyck celebration snapped a picture. It ended up on social media. So the entire hockey world knew that Connor Hellebuyck won the Hart Trophy and the Vezina Trophy. Yeah. Social media in 2025. But I'm right there with you. How it was not unanimous that Connor Hellebuyck, one of the best seasons, I would say, in the last 25 years from a netminder, how it wasn't unanimous, this guy won the Vezina Trophy is insane. As you mentioned it, Vasilevsky got a first-place vote, and that's not an indictment on Vasilevsky. It's more so Hellebuyck was so much better than any other goalie. I mean, to win this award in back-to-back seasons, I don't think people understand how difficult that is to do, but I would argue this season, better than last year, it was. He won the Hart Trophy, but I think from the Leafs perspective, Anthony Stolarz finishes fifth in Vezina voting. He gets a singular second place vote worthy of 3 points and fifth in the voting process. Pretty damn impressive. I'd love to know the GM who voted, Stolarz second best here.
Yeah, it is impressive, right? He had a great year, obviously a little bit of a setback when he got hurt. But that being said, how many games can we look back early in the season when they were the difference maker, right? I feel like we sat on the show, Nick. We sat here after games and we'd be like, I didn't think the Leafs were great. We picked it apart, but we were happy because we won. Right. We were happy because the goalies were a difference maker. There was a lot to go on. And again, I think throughout this season, he was kind of that rock, and again, if he stays healthy in the playoffs, who knows, right? Who knows? Because he was a big difference maker for this hockey team.
The Stolarz conversation is a fascinating one to me, and I would argue it's been 2 concrete years of this guy being an absolute consistent stud. I know last year he was behind Sergei Bobrovsky, but this year, full value, and full credit to Brad Treliving for dissecting, analyzing, and finding this talent behind future Hall of Famer in Sergei Bobrovsky. But the Stolarz numbers really, really good this year. In 34 games, 926 save percentage, led the entire NHL, 21-8-3. But naturally, the conversation, Huts, morphs into what you do July 1. He's eligible for an extension. He's 31, a year away from UFA. Do you want me to throw some comps at you and you can react and act like you are Anthony Stolarz and you tell me what you're looking for? How about that?
Yeah, I think I'd enjoy that. It'd make me feel like I'm
So
back at free agency again here.
exactly, but we all know the agents do you just get the final text or the final call and consulting a bit. But I think luckily in this unique scenario for the Maple Leafs and also Stolarz, there's a bunch of different comparables, and that's why I think this contract won't be as difficult to hammer out as you probably would have intended maybe 6-7 months ago. But the comps I found. Aiden Hill, 6 years, 37.5. That's an AAV of 6.25. Kirill Vejmelka got an extension with Utah, 5 years, 23.75, AAV of 4.75. Kevin Lankinen, 5 years, 22.5, an AAV of 4.5. Logan Thompson, 6 years, 35.1, AAV of 5.85. Mackenzie Blackwood, 5 years, 26.25, AAV 5.25. Joey Decord, 5 years, $25 million. And then the big boys, Shesterkin, 11.25 per season. Ottinger, Allmark, and Swayman all got 8.25 a season. So I talked to you as Anthony Stolarz, no longer Carter Hutton. What are you asking for on July 1 in terms of an extension?
I think it's got to start with a 6. I think it's got to start with a 6. When I look at Kevin Lankinen's deal, I look at Kirill Vejmelka's deal, I look at some of these guys. Yes, there's always that age difference, right? But you look at 2 consistent years of being really good. So you could look at the first year in Florida and be like, well, you played behind Bobrovsky. Florida's really good. You didn't play that many games. And then you back it up with being one of the best goalies in the league. And at 31, yes, I still think you're probably going to end up having to pay him on the back end as he gets a little bit older. But that being said, he's still got 2 or 3 really good years. And if, say, Joseph Woll does come out, you still have him at a pretty good number because the cap's going to go up. He's going to be a good goaltender. So I would look for like 4 years to 5 years in like the 6.5 range. I think that would be something where you would get him to bite.
Spitballing, that's exactly what I feel. Like, I think the consistency with some of these contracts around 5 years, you referenced the age, 31. None of the guys I mentioned are 31. The oldest guy I talked about there was Kevin Lankinen, who's 30. But pretty decent comp there with Lankinen, a career backup, has ascended maybe into a number 1 guy. And we'll see what the Canucks do with Thatcher Demko this summer. But are you feeling comfortable giving, let's say, 5 years and 6 sheets a year to Anthony Stolarz? Like, what would your level of comfort being if you're Brad Treliving?
I'm better than I am Kevin Lankinen, like way better than Kevin Lankinen. Like, when you picture the Vancouver Canucks or an NHL team, like I don't picture Kevin Lankinen lifting the Stanley Cup. Like, just because of size, because of like the presence in the net, there's so much value there. And then I start to think about wear and tear that goes on to a smaller guy, how much more athleticism you have to play. And there's just more room for error, in my opinion, with Kevin Lankinen. And not to take away from that, but that is the inconvenient truth of being a smaller guy, is you have to be so much better and so much more consistent in other areas, where Anthony Stolarz, with his size, his presence, and the way he can play, and then his leadership role too, I think has value too, right? We talk about all year, they're like, we've never had a goalie that communicates this well and is a leader, and he does so many good things. So that being said, if Joseph Woll does take off or there's a situation, he's never going to be on the bench pouting. Like, he's got his payday. I just don't see him having a drop off, like he's going to fall off a cliff here.
Producer Vic writes in via our chat using the Nation Network and the Leafs Nation account. If it starts with a 6, producer Vic walks. Maybe that's his hot take coming up later on. It's not, full disclosure, but I think Maple Leafs Nation are in for a reality check when it comes to this contract extension, because I pulled the chat before we started this show. What would you pay Stolarz? And they're like 2 years and 3.5 mil a season. That's not the way it works. Even the sample size, I know, like even the Blackwood contract, he came in, played 19 games, and because it's so scarce and it's so difficult to find consistent goaltending in this league, you're going to get paid, right?
So if you don't have Stolarz, then who do we have, right? If you let him walk, then we're sitting here in the same situation being like, oh, why don't we have a, you have to pay a guy. When you get a guy, you got to pay him. And they don't grow on trees, right? Because the fact of the matter, if he does go to free agency, you're going to lose him, because at the end of the day, he's 31 years old. He hasn't had like the payday, right? This is going to be he's going to do what he has to do if you don't incentivize him to stay here and be a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Well, the other thing you can do too, I suppose, is play it out, the Mitch Marner effect, play it out the contract year. I think the reasoning behind that's pretty simple. Do you expect Stolarz to have as good a year in year 2 that he did in year 1? I think he's hit his ceiling. Like, how much better can you get from those numbers I just talked about? He had a second place Vezina vote. Like, do you expect him to be a Vezina contender again next year? It's a risky proposition. It's a risky game, but maybe that's the way the Maple Leafs approach it.
It is too. Yeah, I agree with that. But then there becomes value to other teams as a veteran guy who maybe he might not go to a team that's trying to win a Stanley Cup and then becomes a great stopgap where they're like, well, we can pay him. We'll pay you whatever because you're going to be a good leader. You can come in and be solid for us. And then you can help our younger guy who we're trying to grow up, where I just think the risk of him going to free agency really opens up a lot of doors where look at the free agency pool this year. Like Jake Allen's your number one guy, right? And nothing against Jake. I love Jake, but he's not that upper echelon guy where, man, if free agency, if Anthony Stolarz was a free agent this year, think about the money he would be getting because he'd be the number one guy. And we'd be sitting here being like, why didn't we sign him?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because Carolina announced the 1-year extension for Freddie Anderson. And I'm like, why the fuck did they do that? But the quick rebuttal to somebody close to the situation, who else is there out there? I think it's true though. Like, you're right. Like if they don't want to go long-term and give Stolarz what he deserves and what he wants, quite frankly, okay, who's it going to be? Like, do you think Dennis Hildeby's ready to be that guy in the NHL? I don't think he's close. I don't think the Russian kid's close. Like, it's so difficult to find quality net mining in this league. I think the Maple Leafs almost have to engage on a contract. Like, they got to do something here, and hopefully Stolarz is reasonable with his request.
Yeah, and I think there you have the advantage of a guy who hasn't had the big payday too. And I keep circling back to that because that is so important. Where if you could maybe dangle you could maybe get him at 5 something, because if you get to him early where he's like, hey, I just signed that was the deal. Now my rest of my life is I'm set. Where now for Anthony Stolarz, a guy who had a knee injury last year, right? We talked about Pebble and then the concussion. Now it's like, do I risk another season to keep playing? You know, where there's that unknown of like, what if I get hurt, again, and it's something worse and I never get that contract. So I think the advantage is on that side as an older guy with a few injuries in his past. And I've seen this all the time. I remember playing a Thunder Bay boy here, Robert Bertuzzo, I played with a long time. I remember he used to sign every year during the year because he'd always have little things that would come up. And it was like, it felt like the team held the cards. He's like, well, I could take that and maybe get a little bit more, but the risk really isn't worth the reward. And I think that's where the advantage goes to the Maple Leafs earlier.
At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Again, moments away from Craig Button dropping by here on Leafs Morning Take. But generally speaking, Huts, I feel really, really good about the state of the Maple Leafs crease, whether it's Joseph Woll, Anthony Stolarz. I know Dennis Hildeby had a disappointing season, but I think turbulence is expected in young net miners. I talked about it yesterday. They got the Russian kid. I can't pronounce his name yet. When I can, I will say it on this podcast. But if you consider where the Maple Leafs were in their pipeline 4 or 5 years ago, where unfortunately I was covering the team and love the guy, by all accounts, great in the room, but I'm consistently talking about the likes of Michael Hutchinson. I think it's night and day the depth the Maple Leafs have created in between the pipes and should be applauded for so.
Yeah, 100%, right? We see it all the time, right? In the league where goaltending is so hard to come by, NHL guys that can take up minutes, you got to have depth too. And you got to have capable depth because you get to a point where you need guys that can play well. Even like, look at this right now. Like, who really did anyone think that we were going to see Calvin Pickard be a difference maker in the Stanley Cup Finals and the playoffs? And this was a guy that was barely getting a job years ago, right? So you need to find the right fit. You need to find people that can be there. And inside that development, you need to have players that are good people too, that are around the room, because you can't be detrimental to the room as a backup goalie. And I feel like, Nick, there was times in my career I made money because I was a good person, and teams would take that chance on me because they're like, well, Carter's not going to cause any crap. We'll bring him in. He'll take anything because he just wants that seat at the table.
Is that what the Buffalo Sabres said? Hey, Huts, we love you so much.
Well, that was a little different. But I was a bit of a stopgap. That's the same example. Even you talk to Jason Botterill. When they signed me my first year, I was there to play 50 games, and they were trying to groom Linus Allmark, and they wanted me to help Linus, become a pro. And to this day, Linus comes on our show, and he's a good friend of mine, and I feel like he respects how I helped him, how someone helped me, right? You pay it forward.
You do, and the state of the crease is very, very intriguing moving forward as you get to today's guest, brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program, and an unbeatable pricing policy. Charm Diamond Centers is proudly Canadian-owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. For more information, go to charmediamondcenters.com as we bring in the one and only Craig Button. Craig, how are you today?
I'm good. I just want to tell Carter he's still getting paid because he's such a good guy.
Yeah, that's it. Now I just come on here and BS a little bit, I got to find a way.
Yeah. Carter, one of the things, there's no cost to being nice. There's no cost to being a good person. It doesn't cost you anything. And the rewards and the return on that investment, you don't even know where it'll pay off. But if you start off with that mindset, and Carter, just listening to you talk about, yeah, you got to be competent to play in the NHL, but you also you got to know where you fit, and you got to know how you fit. And yeah, you might be younger and you want to make sure that you get an opportunity to be a starting goaltender, but where do you fit? And then as time goes on, how do you fit? Eric Comrie is a great example right now. You know, uh, Connor Hellebuyck wins the Hart Trophy and the Vezina, and he will tell you, and I know he will, that Eric Comrie is as important to him winning those trophies as anybody else on the team. And there's a perfect example of that partnership that goaltenders have, and the importance that working together for the benefit of the team becomes so important for any success you want to have, individually or collectively.
And Craig, before you came on, we were talking about the Maple Leafs crease, how in one fell swoop of a few short years, like you got to feel pretty damn good about what the Maple Leafs have here in between the pipes, whether it's Woll and Stolarz or some of the other guys coming right now. But naturally, obviously, the Hellebuyck conversation, Stolarz getting a second place vote. We're talking about the future and Anthony Stolarz. If you're Brad Treliving, July 1 extension conversation. Are you comfortable? We talked about the comparables, guys like Lankinen, Thompson, Blackwood. You comfortable going maybe 5-6 years with the Stolarz around $6.5 million?
Well, I think there's two parts of that, Nick. Number one is you've had an opportunity now to be around Anthony for a year, and you've watched him perform at an elite level. Let's make no mistake about that. Number two is you have to now look at, okay, what are our options if it's not Anthony Stolarz on a longer term contract? I think that's exactly where the Vancouver Canucks found themselves with Kevin Lankinen. And Kevin played really well for them. And they sit back and go, okay, is this maybe a little more term than we want to pay, maybe a little bit more dollars? But what are our options? And I think for Brad Treliving in the Toronto Maple Leafs, having a year with Anthony Stolarz, seeing how well he performed, and even last year in Florida, when in limited, I mean, he didn't play as much behind Bobrovsky, but his numbers were outstanding. And as he's taken more of the crease time and more minutes and more games, he hasn't fallen off in his performance. So I guess to finish that off, Nick, I'd be very comfortable with Anthony Stolarz signing him to a longer term contract in that range that you just mentioned with those goaltender comparables.
And again, right, that's 2 years of, he's played well, he didn't play as many games, and he's won. And you want guys around your team that have won, that have seen guys win, that are good pros, and the value in that, right, Craig? But for me, the Matthew Knies contract, the one that's, is that an easy contract to negotiate as a GM, or is this a risky one? Because we're looking back on some contracts where guys have taken shorter deals in Toronto, and next thing you know, they're holding them to the fire when they want their payday. Is this one where you try to lock them up for 8 years right away?
Yeah, well, let me go back specifically to Brad Treliving, and in a very, and if not very similar, almost exact same situation. Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk came out of his entry-level contract, and he only signed it. He only signed his contract on I believe it was the night or two before the regular season started. He was holding out, and it ended up being a 3-year contract. Now, my understanding is all Tkachuk was asking for was the Draisaitl contract. And if you go back and look at where Matthew Tkachuk was at that time and compare it to where Draisaitl was when he signed that contract, that would have been a phenomenal contract for Matthew Tkachuk and the Calgary Flames. Brad went the short term. He ended up losing Matthew Tkachuk. So I think with Matthew Knies, that type of player, I mean, we use all kinds of types of descriptors, unicorn, unique, what he brings to the table. I think, if anything, that the Matthew Tkachuk situation should be a guideline for Brad Treliving to sign him for 8 years.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is walk this guy to UFA status, which is there's a potential there, but he has to be the top priority, leading up to the draft and also free agency here.
Yeah, well, it's not just walking him to free agency. I mean, quite frankly, Brad Treliving pissed off Matthew Tkachuk. He pissed him off. And then Matthew said, I'm out of here. Get me out of here. Because I'm not going to it was a year before his unrestricted free agency. And he said, I'm not playing here. You want to treat me that way? I have the leverage now. So players are proud. Players are competitors. If you want players to be hard competitive on the ice, what do you think they're going to do? Roll over off the ice? Matthew Tkachuk doesn't know anything about rolling over. And that's why I say when you look at Brad Treliving's experience with Matthew Tkachuk, that to me is the guideline. And 8 years is the term. Get it done and get it done. And absolutely, Nick, it's a priority.
Yeah, and I think again he's a hockey family too, right? You have a father that's been around the game. You're not going to pull the wool over his eyes, right? This is something that and for Matthew Knies, obviously he's priority, but Mitch Marner, like obviously this has been the elephant in the room for such a long time here. Craig, does he come back, or do you think his days are done?
Yeah, it feels like he's moving on. Carter, one of the things that I'm constantly reminded of is Brett Hull. Brett Hull was a great player. He was a player in St. Louis that was the face of the franchise. He was an MVP in the league. He was a great goal scorer. And it's somehow, the narrative around Brett Hull was, oh, you can't win with Brett Hull. Well, we saw it as a great opportunity in 1998 to get an elite goal scorer on our team in Dallas that we felt could, lift us and get us over the hump, so to speak, and become a Stanley Cup. We were already a contender, but to give us a better chance to win. If I told you that there was 150 people that came up to me unsolicited, as well as others that are, and told us that we would never win with Brett Hall, like I might be selling it short on the number of people. What's interesting is after the fact, when we did win with Brett Hall, not one person came back and said, geez, we were wrong. And I think this is the reason I bring it up is I think it's the same thing with Mitch Marner. When I look at what Brett Hall did for the St. Louis Blues and the greatness that he exhibited in the league, Mitch Marner's been a top player in this league. And now he's getting maligned for the failures of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You can win with Mitch Marner, and maybe it takes a different scenario. Our scenario in Dallas was perfectly fit, not just for Brett, but for us as well. And we weren't going to turn our backs on him. It feels like right now in Toronto that Mitch is the whipping boy, so to speak. And maybe it's a change of scenery that helps him, find a way to winning, and another team is going to benefit from that. But that's how I look at Mitch Marner. But it does feel like moving on from Toronto is something that will happen.
And I think it's my understanding that the Leafs would like to bring Marner back, just not at the price he's looking for. And again, you can make that case for every free agent. I mean, you think you know your worth, and he's probably worth that. And the Leafs are not open to bringing him back at that price. But you look at this Stanley Cup Final. Has your opinion changed on this Maple Leafs team when you look at other teams play the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, and I just want to make a quick mention about Mitch Marner. Like, Mitch Marner's been a first-team All-Star right wing in the league. He's been a Selke Trophy finalist. He's right up there in top scorers. He's making just under $11 million. It's not like you're jumping Mitch Marner from $6 million to 13 and a half. And to me, when you look around the league and you start to look at value, you start to say, what is Mitch Marner's value? And I don't know what the numbers are, but you're not talking about like a significant lift in his salary. You're talking about something that's commensurate. I think he's performed to the contract, so I think it becomes a little bit of a specious argument to say that we want to keep him, but not at his dollars. Like, and again, I don't know what the dollars are, but that feels like a little bit of a cop out. Now, that being said, I think the template for success in the Stanley Cup playoffs and ultimately to win 16 games and to compete and win a Stanley Cup, it hasn't changed in 80 years. It's not going to change. You need length on the blue line. You need size. You need ability to grind out. You need size on the walls. Yeah, you need skill. But there's certain elements that are never going to change. Nick, I always use football as an example. You need offensive linemen, you need defensive linemen, you need wide receivers, you need tight ends, you need a running back, you need a quarterback, you need linebackers. Hockey's no different. You need heavy players that can forecheck and grind. You need guys that can score. You need guys that can get the puck out of your zone. You need defensemen that can defend. But bottom line is you need all different types. But you're not winning in the NFL or the CFL with 240-pound linemen. You need weight. You need some heft. Can you win with a smaller running back? Yeah. Can you win with a smaller forward? Can you win with a smaller defenseman? Yeah. But you can't have too many of them. And that template is never changing. And in fact, the since 2005, with the rule implementation following the lockout, the development of the big player is just becoming more profound. And so bigger and more skilled is coming. And we're seeing evidence of that. And if you think it's changing in the playoffs, you're just kidding yourself.
Yeah, and again, a tale as old as time, right, Craig? We see that.
Yes.
You get the playoff time in the game, and that's that happy medium of like being good in regular season, but then building a team good enough to grind it out, right? Because you could be flash, and then for me, Brad Marchand, right? Is this a guy now where has he got his second life, and this is some the Leafs could be? You know, he's making his way across the Atlantic now. Who knows? Are the Leafs next?
Well, I mean, I think he'd be a great addition for the Leafs for a number of reasons. You know, coming in with the reputation he has, coming in and making sure that when he speaks, that everybody's going to listen. And it's not about it's about Austin Matthews listening. It's about your best players paying attention and understanding. And I'll go back to our team in Dallas when we traded for Joe Nieuwendyk. Joe Nieuwendyk walked into our team, into our locker room, and like with a snap of a finger, just his presence alone changed things because he was real, he was legitimate, his credibility was beyond reproach, and that helped Madonna, and that helped Hatcher, and I think that when we look at the Toronto Maple Leafs players. You look at Austin Matthews, you look at William Nylander, you look at Morgan Riley, just that I'm naming some of their key players. A Brad Marchand stepping in there, I think helps in that regard. And you talk about your second life. We've seen players perform as they get older. Brad Marchand, as we know, is not the same player today that he was 5 years ago, but he's still a highly effective player, and and he can still be a really important player. So when we look at that, I think there's, we look at the age curve and we go, okay, yeah, it should be falling off. Most players do fall off, some don't. And I think Brad Marchand falls into the latter group.
And there's a guy in Edmonton, Corey Perry, who defies logic as well. Joe Pavelski's a guy for years. Pavelski just exceeded expectation. I think the Greybeards are making a comeback right now in the NHL. But, Craig, we talk about Brad Marchand. Are there any other names that you think would make a lot of sense from the Maple Leafs perspective to look at here? We've talked a lot about Mason Marchment, Jonathan Marchessault, obviously Sam Bennett, but it sounds like he's going back to Florida. Anybody stick out for you outside of the guys we just talked about?
Yeah, well, yeah. Like again, you're looking at multiple areas. So we talked about Mitch Marner earlier. So that could make sense. Like why you would look at a Jonathan Marchessault, and Jonathan is one. But there's two other places that I would look at, and I would look at really hard. And one's a trade, and one would be a free agent signing. The Toronto Maple Leafs, like to me, getting an Aaron Ekblad, not getting getting Aaron Ekblad, I think would be something that would be really significant. He's in the battle, and I mean, I love Chris Tannen. Blue line that much better. The other player that I would look at trying to acquire is Brian Rust. I would go after Brian Rust. I would try to inquire what it would take to get Brian Rust out of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I also would look at William Karlsson of the Vegas Golden Knights to play in the center ice position. He's been a good player. He can swing into different spots if you need be. But those are the players. I mean, we talk about Sam Bennett and everything. I'll be straightforward. I mean, Mason Marchment was part of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, it's not that I would not be interested in Mason Marchment, but I would explore some other areas before I would get to Mason. And I really like Mason, but I would explore William Karlsson. I would explore Brian Rust. I would explore Aaron Ekblad before I got to Mason Marchment.
You know, Craig, obviously you have a good grasp on the scouting and what's been going on. And we look at a player in Easton Cowan who just had an unbelievable Memorial Cup run. Obviously took a bit of a setback, I think, just in the public eyes and Leafs fans with the World Juniors and the way that it went. But like, what's your take on his game? And, is he NHL ready now?
So let me answer the last question first, Carter. I think NHL ready depends on what your expectations are for him. Do I think he could come in and play in the NHL next year? Yeah, I think he could. Is he going to be the player that eventually I think he'll become? No, I think there's going to be, like any young player, and certainly where he's at physically, there'll be some growing pains, but he's a smart player. He's a competitive player. And I think that that's something that can allow him to get into the lineup and help you in different areas. He's not going to be a frontline player, NHL ready next year, but that'll come in time. It's always fascinating to me when we look at the World Junior, and there's so many eyeballs on the World Junior, and in a lot of cases that becomes a lens to evaluate players. 21 of the 25 players that were on that World Junior team and had won multiple times, either with their club team or combined with Team Canada. That was a failure of the coach. I'm not hiding from it. I'm not ducking. He did not do a very good job. And so now everybody looks at it. What about the World Junior? I get it. It was just an abysmal performance, but the coach was never able to get the players connected in any purposeful way. Easton Cowan is a competitor. He's a guy that wants to be a difference maker. I read a comment by Jason Carmanos, the assistant general manager of the Buffalo Sabres, and he was asked about, I'm paraphrasing, trying to find competitive players. And he says, it's hard to identify him at 18. No, it isn't, Jason. It's really easy to identify. Just watch who competes and plays hard and gets invested. That's Easton Cowan. And if you want players like Easton Cowan and you want players that can change your DNA that are competitors, you better draft players like Easton Cowan. No question in my mind that I think he's going to be a good NHLer. Doug Gilmour, I think, was a 6th or 7th round draft pick, and we all know what he became. I call Easton Cowan a lowercase Doug Gilmour in terms of his competitiveness and his fire and ability to perform when it counts the most. And I think that's important for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And they need a lot more, maybe not a lot more, but getting more players like that will help that DNA change that Brad Treliving is after.
I know somebody always competes as well. His name is Craig Button. Craig, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Carter. Great to spend some time with you.
Take care, bud. That is Craig Button of TSN, bringing the heat. I love the passion. But he's so right. I think there's all these naysayers out there on Easton Cowan. But what a great way to end your junior career, though, eh, Huts?
Oh, unbelievable. And again, I can't say that enough as we watch a team that frustrates us at times and people you want a guy that's a competitor, man. I'm telling you, if I'm on a team, young or old, whoever it is, you want those guys that are going to drag you into the fight. Because there's one thing I'll tell you, throughout an 82-game season, you take nights off and you have rough nights and your stars aren't there. But when you have guys that bring the juice like that, it just drags you into the fight. And we're seeing it firsthand, Florida Panthers. Sometimes it's not glamorous, but a player like Easton Cowan, if he's gonna bring it every night, that's what you want in your team, in your culture. Put him with Matthew Nyes and see that growth curve. It's going to be awesome. I love it.
I love it too. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's time now for the crispy hot take of the day, presented by the Ninja Crispy 4-in-1 portable glass air fryer.
Meet the first of its kind, the Ninja Crispy portable cooking system. The power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hand, so you can cook big or small batches. Just prep it, crisp it, serve it, and store it all in one.
It is an all-in-one system that includes 4-quart, 6-cup Tupperware glass containers and 2 storage lids. The Ninja Crispy is thermal shock resistant and go from frozen to crispy in minutes. With the Crispy Power Pod, you get the power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hands. The 4-quart container fits 4 pounds of chicken or veggies. Cook a personal-sized meal in 7 minutes in the 6-cup container. Max Crisp, bake, air fry, and re-crisp with the Ninja Crispy. You can prep, cook, and store anything from crispy favorites to one-dish meals. Visit their website in the link in the show description or check out ninjakitchen.ca. You ready for this hot take? We should preface this hot take first and announce and say that Joe Bowen earlier today via X announcing that 25-26 will be his last as the voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Huts year number 45. By my math, he's done 28 of those with Jim Ralph by his side. How about that?
What a legendary run. And, obviously you're the voice of the Leafs, a legend around the game, someone you got to work pretty close with. I just think it's great. It's great to know and kind of have that farewell tour, because I know sometimes people don't do that. You don't really get to say your goodbyes. They just fade off into the sunset. But obviously, what a voice of the Maple Leafs. Someone will be remembered forever.
With that in mind, here is producer Vic's hot take of the day. Excuse me. Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph are the best in the league. I can't dispute that. I'm biased. I worked with these guys for a couple of years when I was the host alongside Gord Stellick for Leafs Nation coverage. They are two of the very best. So insightful, fun to be around. And there's just something familiar with hearing Joe Bowen's voice call a game. And I know I made a huge thing of things, and rightfully so. These guys weren't traveling, have not been traveling, period. Never mind the Stanley Cup playoffs. And in my world, they'll go down as absolute legends. Joe Bowen, I mean, is there any other voice more synonymous with the Toronto Maple Leafs than Joe Bowen? I say no.
No, I'm with you. I don't think so. You start thinking about certain teams and the history, but yeah, Joe Bowen is a staple when you think about the Toronto Maple Leafs and you think about what he's built and his famous calls and what he's been around, what he's meant to this hockey team. So I'm with Vic. I'm crispy on this one, Nikki. I'm all in on Vicky's take.
Great take from producer Vic to wrap up another week of the crispy hot takes, and presented by Ninja, of course. But want to get in the action for Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365. They got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older, Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit ConnexOntario.ca. Was looking at the numbers following last night's game, early odds for Game 5. 1 day break, by the way. We made all this about the 2-day break, and we need extra travel days for the media. All of a sudden, out the door that goes. We got a 1 day break, and then Game 5 Saturday night. Who do you have? Early favorite, by the way. Slight edge in favorite is the Oilers in Game 5.
Oof, slight favorite. I worry about the back end, the minutes they played with Troy Stetcher barely playing last game and depth-wise, but I just feel like it's going to be like the McDavid game. Or, you look at last year, right? I think in Game 5, what did he have, 4 or 5 points last year? The home ice advantage and being in your home bed, I think, comes into play here. So I'm going to lean toward the Oilers in this one at home.
I'm right there with you. For those of you who've been listening and watching, I've been consistent with saying Edmonton's going to win the Cup for maybe 3 months now. I think destiny is a real thing. I think, just watch last night's game. You tell me Edmonton's not winning the Cup, I think you're crazy. I know the Panthers are an excellent team, and I'm an idiot for naysaying that team in the past and this year specifically. There's just something magical about this run for the Oilers, and I still envision this series going 7 games and it taking place in Canada, in Edmonton. But I like the Oilers to win Game 5. I like the Panthers to win Game 6. And I think we're in a Game 7 a week from now, next Friday night in Edmonton.
I hope so, Nick. I just think it sets up well. And I'm with you. You watch Florida at times and you're like, this Florida team is just so much better, right? Does it not feel that way? They're just complete. But it is something about this scenario and McDavid and Draisaitl and the fact that they just need a crack and they find a way to catch up. And if they fall behind, they're never out of it. It definitely feels that way. But that being said, the best part about this is these are the 2 best teams in hockey right now. And we're going to see one hell of a Stanley Cup final.
Oh, yeah. Night and day compared to the rest of the league. This has been a bloodbath, for a lack of a better term, Stanley Cup final. It's been so good. There's been recent years where I haven't been as much into the Stanley Cup final. I'm so invested. I know I was there last year. I had a lot of fun covering that series with the NHL. But this series specifically, I can't wait for the day to go down so I can watch the game. It's been really, really good stuff. And I think to me, there's the attachment of seeing a Connor McDavid go for another cup here, or try to win a cup finally, Draisaitl. And then from the Florida perspective, we're seeing a team, the dynasty word, if you want to throw that out there, but they're that damn good. And you really are intrigued to see and compelled if somebody's going to be able to beat Goliath like that. That's the feel I get on a daily basis watching the Florida Panthers. They're so damn good and so damn resilient. Again, getting back to the combo from earlier on, they're down 1, and of course they score. They pull their goalie. Of course they score. They make a big play, and you just hope one day the Maple Leafs will be able to push through and get the job done. And it's a Matthews scoring in double OT in game 6 of a cup final or something like dramatic and crazy like that to really propel that team. Because again, watching both Florida and Edmonton, it just always seems when they're up against it, somebody of significance rises up. And one day, Huts, I hope that's a Maple Leaf who can do that.
Yeah, me too, right? It feels like it's built for it. And again, the more exposure, the more experiences that they can get there. Because there's lots of teams that last for a long time without really getting over that hump, and then they have a breakthrough. So the future is bright in Toronto. There's a lot of good young players and a lot of good things moving forward. But that being said, this has been a lot of fun to watch. And again, I think for those players watching this series right now, knowing how close they were against Florida, obviously stings a bit, but I think it is helpful to gain confidence and understanding of where you're at and how good you are as a hockey team.
I love that Hut's going after those learning lessons in year 10. I really appreciate that. I hate watching the Florida Panthers. I really, really do hate watch the Florida Panthers. I hate that team so much. They're so fucking good, and it drives me insane. There's always a response, and I have to give the Leafs credit. There was a lot of response in the Stanley Cup playoffs, with the exception of Game 5. Game 7, although you can mention they responded in Game 6. But the Panthers are just so damn good. Like, I'm envious of what they've put together in that organization. And I can't believe their media members for the second straight year are covering a Stanley Cup final. Like, I was thinking last night, Huts, would you take, like, for example, Corey Perry has this knack for losing in the Stanley Cup final. Would you sign up to sign Corey Perry knowing that you would lose in the Stanley Cup final if you're the Leafs? I probably would. I know.
100%,
it's sickening.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a... Just to get there, it's like, obviously it stings, but like even if we look back on this and if they were to lose again, if Florida does win, I think you could still look at this and be like, it's unbelievable honor that he made it to the Stanley Cup final this many years. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, it obviously sucks, like that side of it, but like
that is a consolation.
It's a crazy stat. And he bounced like a crazy stat.
Like, it would be insane if Perry doesn't win this year. What's that? 5 straight Cup finals, and he hasn't won any of them. Like, he won in Anaheim years.
When Bobrovsky made that save on him last night with the toe in front of the net, like, that was a great chance, and it hit like the cap of his skate. And when he showed him on his bench and he just put his helmet down, like, I actually felt gutted for him, because he's like,
well, that's because he got blown up. Forsling fucking blew him up there. You saw that. He smoked
100%. But like, you just feel for him, right? Like, the fact like he knows how fragile these moments are, and he has to find a way to like push over this year.
Deadly Dad Gaming, just to wrap with the quote of the show: take a shot every time Hutz bumps his mic. LOL. So true. I always hear a clang, and I'm like, is our operating system going down?
Oh, yeah, it's down here,
banging your kid's desk, eh? Yeah, I love it.
Well, I'm buddy. I have ADD. I'm not meant to sit here for an hour straight. I get a little fidgety. Okay, so give me a break. Okay, take the good with the bad here. Okay.
Classic goaltender, but we have to give Hutz credit. His second hour of programming today, of course, he co-hosts on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. So shout out to them, Hutz. Great stuff, and I believe you're with me on the 24th next, just prior draft week, Tuesday the 24th. So looking forward to that, bud.
Yeah, that's it, buddy. We'll be in it, and I look forward to it. Always nice being on it. Doing the Friday edition, eh? Usually I don't work Fridays, but for you, Nick, I'll do anything.
Hey, we talked about nice guys in that interview with Craig Button. I was going to bring it up. Is there anybody nicer than Carter Hutton? No, there's not in my mind. Even throw Jay Rosehill and producer Vic in that conversation. Anyways, coming up Monday, Zach Phillips in the chair, co-hosting the show. We haven't heard from Zach, and this guy's in one. If you monitor Zach's Twitter on a daily basis, he is against it. Okay. This guy has got some demons. If there's one guy I know in my life who is not handling this Maple Leafs loss well, it is Zach Phillips. So we're going to get to the bottom of things coming up on Monday. We'll recap Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final, look ahead to Game 5 on Tuesday, and much, much more coming your way here on Leafs Morning Take. Thank you everybody in the chat at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to Craig Button for dropping by. Thank you to producer Vic. For Carter Hutton, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk on Monday. Take care, everybody. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.